Everything you were taught about explaining yourself is backwards. You were taught that explaining is honest, open, mature. That when someone misunderstands you, or judges you, or questions your choices, the right thing, the good thing, is to explain, to clarify, to help them understand. And so you do it, constantly. You justify your decisions. You defend your choices. You explain why you did what you did, to people who already decided you were wrong. And every single time you do it, you hand a little more of your power to the person you're explaining yourself to. Because here's the truth, almost no one understands. The moment you explain yourself to someone, you have accepted that they get to judge you. You've handed them the gavel. You've agreed that their approval is something you need to earn. And the people who understand power, the ones who move through the world untouchable, figured out a long time ago that the most powerful thing you can do, in the face of judgment, is often to say nothing at all. Machiavelli understood it. And by the end of this, you're going to understand why the strongest people you know almost never explain themselves, and how to become one of them. Let me show you what this looks like in your actual life, because you do it more than you think. Someone questions a decision you made, and you feel that immediate pull to justify it, to lay out your reasons, to make them understand. Someone judges you for something, and you rush to explain, to defend, to clear it up. A family member disapproves of your choices, and you find yourself, again, making the case for your own life, as if you're on trial and they're the jury. And every time, you walk away feeling smaller, more anxious, less sure of yourself than when you started. You didn't clarify anything, you just performed your own defense for someone who was never going to acquit you, right? You know that exact feeling. The over-explaining that leaves you feeling weaker, not clearer. Comment the word explained if you've ever exhausted yourself explaining your choices to someone who had already made up their mind about you. I want to see how common this is, because it drains more people of more energy than almost anything else. And by the end of this, you're going to stop doing it. Let me show you why explaining yourself makes you weak, and why silence makes you untouchable. Here's the first thing you have to understand. Explaining yourself, in most situations, is not communication. It's submission. When you explain your choices to someone, what you're really saying underneath the words is, "Please approve of me. Please understand so you'll stop judging me. Please give me permission to have done what I already did." And that request, that quiet plea for approval, is the exact opposite of power. The powerful do not ask permission for their choices. They make them, and they let the choices stand, and they feel no need to get everyone on board. The person who has to explain every decision is announcing, with every explanation, that they don't quite feel entitled to their own life. Think about the people you find most impressive. The ones who seem solid, self-possessed, unbothered. Do they over-explain? No, they make a choice, and if you question it, they might tell you once, simply, and then they let it go. They don't chase your understanding. They don't need it. Their sense of rightness comes from inside, not from your approval. And that quality, that self-contained certainty that needs no audience, is magnetic. It's the thing that makes someone untouchable. You cannot control a person who doesn't need you to understand them. And here's the deeper mechanism, the thing that makes this so important. Every time you explain yourself to get someone's approval, you're training yourself to need it. You're building the habit of checking with others before you can feel okay about your own life. It becomes automatic. You make a choice, and before you've even finished making it, part of you is already rehearsing how you'll justify it to the people who might disapprove. That's not freedom. That's living your whole life in an invisible courtroom, where every decision comes with a built-in defense prepared for an imaginary jury. And the way out of that courtroom is not to win the jury over. It's to realize you were never actually on trial and walk out. Now compare that to the over-explainer. Every justification is a little tug on the other person's sleeve. Do you get it now? Do you approve now? Are we okay now? And the more they tug, the less powerful they seem, because they've made their peace depend on someone else's verdict. The explaining itself, no matter how good the reasons, broadcasts need. And need, in the game of power, is weakness. And here's something you have to understand about the people who demand explanations from you. Very often, the demand itself is the power move. When someone puts you in the position of having to justify yourself, they've already won something. before you've said a word. They've cast themselves as the authority and you as the one who owes an account. Think about how it feels to be asked, in that particular tone, to explain yourself. You feel suddenly small, defensive, on the back foot. That's not an accident. Making you explain is how a person establishes dominance without ever raising their voice. And the moment you start explaining, you've accepted the role they assigned you. You've agreed to be the one on trial. The whole power dynamic was decided in the first 2 seconds, and your explanation just confirms it. So the powerful learn to recognize that setup and refuse it, not with hostility. Just by declining to treat every question as a summons, someone demands to know why you did something, in that judging tone, and instead of launching into your defense, you simply say, calmly, that you gave it a lot of thought and you're comfortable with your choice, and then you stop. No case, no evidence, no plea. And watch how that lands. It's not rude, it's just a person who doesn't accept the role of defendant. And there is almost nothing more quietly powerful than that. Comment about the one person you keep explaining yourself to, over and over, even though it never once changed their mind. Just who they are to you. Because naming them is how you start to see the trial for what it is. And it gets worse, because explaining yourself doesn't just signal weakness. It actively creates it, in real time as you speak. Here's what happens. Start explaining a decision you were actually sure about, and as you talk, laying out reason after reason, something strange happens to you. You start to hear how it sounds. You notice the other person's skeptical face, and the certainty you walked in with begins to wobble. By the third or fourth reason, you're not explaining anymore, you're negotiating with your own doubt, out loud, in front of someone who's enjoying watching you squirm. The explanation didn't strengthen your position, it dissolved it. You talked yourself out of your own certainty. This is why over-explaining is a trap with no bottom. The more you explain, the weaker you sound. And the weaker you sound, the more you feel you need to explain. And around it goes, until you've delivered a 5-minute defense of something that needed no defense at all, and you feel awful, and the other person is more convinced than ever that they were right to question you. Because think about it, who explains at length? Who piles up reason after reason? The guilty, the unsure, the person who doesn't quite believe their own case. Length reads as doubt. The innocent, the certain, the powerful, they say little because they have nothing to prove. You can see this in courtrooms, in interrogations, in every high-stakes room where people read each other for a living. The over-explanation is a tell. Investigators are trained to notice it. The person who gives a short, calm, consistent answer reads as truthful. The person who floods the room with detail, who volunteers explanations no one asked for, who keeps adding just one more reason, reads as someone trying to talk their way out of something. And the strange part is, it works that way even when the over-explainer is completely innocent. The truth, over-explained, starts to sound like a lie. That's how powerful this dynamic is. It's not about whether you're right. It's about what all that explaining signals. And it signals fear. And here's the part that really matters. When someone has already decided something about you, your explanation doesn't reach them at all. Their mind is closed. Every word you say just gives them more material to argue with, more surface to attack, more evidence, in their eyes, that you're defensive, that you're guilty, that they were right. You cannot explain your way out of a verdict that's already been reached. You can only dignify it by treating it as a court worth pleading to. Comment the word enough if you're tired of justifying your choices to people who were never going to approve of them anyway. Because naming that exhaustion is the first step to putting the gavel down. Now let me tell you about Machiavelli, because his life is the most painful lesson in this rule that history offers, and it's not the lesson you'd expect. You'd think the man who understood power better than almost anyone would have mastered this. And in his writing he did. He understood, better than anyone of his age, how power really worked, how the strong carried themselves, how little the powerful needed to explain. But understanding a rule and living it are two different things, and Machiavelli's own life is the proof. After he lost everything, his position, his career, his standing, after he was falsely accused and tortured and exiled to his little farm, Machiavelli spent the rest of his life doing the one thing his own wisdom should have warned him against. He spent it trying to explain himself, trying to prove his worth, trying to convince the powerful Medici family, the very people who had cast him out, that he was valuable, that he deserved to be brought back, that they had misjudged him. Year after year from his exile, he reached toward the people who had already closed the door on him, hoping that if he could just show them enough, prove enough, explain enough, they would finally understand what they were missing and let him back in. They never did. He spent over a decade in that exile, one of the most brilliant political minds who ever lived, quietly consumed by the need to be understood and reaccepted by people who had simply moved on without him. He could see the rule so clearly on the page, he could not follow it in his own heart. And it cost him his final years, spent reaching for an approval that was never, ever going to come. And I want you to feel why this is so human, so relatable, because it's not stupidity. Machiavelli wasn't a fool. The pull he felt is the same one you feel. When someone important rejects us, dismisses us, decides we're not enough, something deep inside refuses to accept it. We can't let it go. We become almost obsessed with the idea that if we could just make them see, just prove ourselves one more time, just explain properly, they'd finally understand and take it all back. And so we keep reaching, keep performing, keep trying to earn our way back into the good opinion of someone who closed the book on us long ago. It feels like persistence. It feels like it should work, and it almost never does, because their verdict was never really about the evidence. It was about them, and nothing you explain can change that. Comment the word dismissed if there's someone who wrote you off, and part of you is still, even now, trying to prove them wrong. Because almost everyone has that one person, and seeing the pattern is how you start to set it down. And here is the part almost no one knows, the detail that turns his whole story into a warning you'll never forget. The Prince, that famous book, the one we still read 500 years later, the cold masterpiece of political strategy, was itself an act of explaining himself. Machiavelli wrote it in large part as a gift to the Medici. He dedicated it to them with humble, almost pleading words, essentially saying, "Look at what I know. Look at how useful I could be to you. Please see my value and take me back." The greatest book on power ever written was, underneath, a job application. A brilliant, desperate attempt by a broken man to explain his worth to the people who had discarded him. Sit with that. The masterpiece was a plea, and the plea failed. The Medici did not read it and rushed to reinstate him. As far as we know, it did almost nothing for him in his own lifetime. He died still on the outside, the book that would make him immortal sitting there as a monument to an explanation that no one important ever accepted. He poured his genius into proving himself to people who weren't listening, and the proving got him nothing. Only later, long after he was dead and past caring, did the world finally understand what he was worth. And that's the lesson, sharper than any rule he ever wrote. If Machiavelli himself, with all his understanding, could waste his final years explaining his worth to people who'd already dismissed him, then you need to see how powerful that trap is. The need to be understood by the people who've judged us is one of the deepest, most human pulls there is. And it is almost always a waste. The approval you're chasing from the people who've closed their minds is the one prize that explaining can never win. And notice where this shows up in your own life, because it's rarely as dramatic as exile. It's the ex you keep mentally arguing with, years later, building the perfect case for why you were right. It's the parent whose approval you're still, somehow, trying to earn in your 40s. It's the former friend, the old boss, the person from your past who decided you were a certain way, and some quiet part of you is still assembling evidence to the contrary, still hoping the message finally gets through. All of that energy poured toward verdicts that were sealed long ago. Machiavelli poured his genius into it. You're pouring your peace into it, and it buys the same thing his did. Nothing. Comment the word proving if you've spent real energy, maybe years of it, trying to prove your worth to someone who had already made up their mind. Because that confession, said out loud, is often the moment the spell finally breaks. Now here is where I have to be careful and challenge something, because you could take the wrong lesson from all this, and the wrong lesson would make your life colder and smaller. You might be thinking the answer is to never explain anything to anyone, to become a wall, to go silent and mysterious with everyone, to stop opening up, to treat every question as an attack. And that is not the lesson. And living that way is its own kind of prison. Because there are people in your life who deserve your explanations. People who love you, who respect you, who ask about your choices not to judge you, but because they genuinely want to understand you. And to those people, explaining yourself isn't submission. It's intimacy. It's the beautiful human act of letting someone in. Going silent with them wouldn't make you powerful, it would just make you alone. So the rule is not never explain. The rule is discernment about who has earned an explanation. Here's the test. Is this person asking to understand me or asking me to justify myself? Those are completely different. The person who wants to understand you is on your side, curious, open, and they deserve your openness back. The person who wants you to justify yourself has already judged you and is just inviting you to perform your own defense so they can rule against it. To the first person, explain freely. That's love. To the second, say little, because that's not a conversation. It's a trial, and you don't have to show up to it. And you can feel the difference in your body if you pay attention. When someone who loves you asks about your choice, there's warmth in it, and explaining feels good, connecting, like being seen. When someone who's judging you demands an account, there's a coldness, a pressure, and explaining feels like shrinking, like begging, like you're losing something with every word. Your own nervous response is the tell. If explaining makes you feel closer and lighter, you're with someone who earned it. If it makes you feel smaller and more anxious, you're in front of a judge, and the wise move is to stop talking. Learn to read that signal, and you'll always know which mode you're in. That's the whole skill. Not silence with everyone, silence with the judges, openness with the ones who've earned it. You save your explanations for the people who actually want to know you, and you stop spending them on the people who only want to grade you. Comment about the one person in your life who never makes you explain yourself. The one who just gets you, who's on your side, who you can be fully open with. I want a comment section full of them, because those are the people who earned your explanations, and they're the whole point. So let me show you what happens when you stop explaining yourself to the people who haven't earned it. Because it's not just that you stop losing power. You start gaining a strange kind of it. There is a quiet authority in the person who doesn't explain. When you make a choice and simply let it stand, without a case, without a defense, without anxiously managing everyone's opinion of it, you communicate something no explanation ever could. You communicate that you don't need their approval. And that, paradoxically, often earns you more respect than any justification would. People are drawn to those who seem self-governed, who move by their own compass, who don't seem to need the crowd's permission. The unexplained choice carries a weight the over-explained one never can. It says, "This is my decision, and I am at peace with it, and your opinion of it is not my concern." And something else happens, something for you, on the inside. Every time you resist the urge to explain yourself to someone who is going to judge you anyway, you get a little stronger. You reclaim a little of the certainty that the explaining used to bleed away. You start to locate your sense of rightness inside yourself, where it belongs, instead of outsourcing it to the verdict of whoever happens to be questioning you. Over time, this changes you. You become harder to destabilize, harder to control, harder to knock off your center, because your center is no longer up for a vote. That's what untouchable actually means. Not that no one can criticize you. People will always criticize you. It means their criticism stops reaching the place where your peace lives. You heard it, you considered whether it came from someone who's earned a place in your judgment, and if it didn't, you let it pass, without a single word of defense, and kept walking. The judge banged the gavel at an empty courtroom, because you simply declined to appear. And here's a small experiment that will show you the power of this faster than any argument. This week, the next time someone questions a choice of yours in that judging tone, try the thing that feels almost impossible. Don't defend it. Just say, simply, that it's what you've decided, and leave it there. No reasons, no case. Watch two things happen. First, watch how much it unsettles them, because they were braced for your defense, and you didn't give it. And second, and this is the important one, watch how you feel afterward. Not the shrinking, anxious feeling of the over-explainer. Something steadier, taller. The quiet strength of a person who kept their reasons to themselves because they didn't owe them to anyone. You'll feel it the first time, and you'll want it again. Comment the word declined if you're going to try it this week. If you're going to catch yourself mid-explanation with someone who hasn't earned it and just declined to appear, because saying it here, out loud, makes it far more likely you'll actually do it when the moment comes. So let's bring it together, because this one rule, held well, will change how you move through every hard conversation for the rest of your life. Explaining yourself to people who've already judged you is not honesty. It's submission. It hands them the gavel. It broadcasts your need for approval, and it dissolves your own certainty in real time as you speak. The powerful say little, not because they're hiding something, but because they don't need permission for their own lives. And the skill is not going silent with everyone. It's discernment, openness with the people who want to understand you, silence with the people who only want to judge you. And here's the whole thing in one sentence. The moment you stop explaining yourself to people who were never going to approve, you take back the one thing they were quietly stealing every time you did. Your power to be at peace with your own choices. That's what Machiavelli understood on the page and couldn't quite live in his heart. He spent his last years explaining his worth to people who'd closed the door, and it got him nothing but exhaustion. You don't have to make his mistake. You get to learn it from him and put the gavel down, today. So, Machiavelli, let me finish it. He died in 1527, still in some sense waiting to be understood, still on the outside. The great explanation of his life, his masterpiece, had not bought him back the acceptance he spent years reaching for. He died feeling, by most accounts, like a man whose worth had gone unrecognized, whose explanations had fallen on deaf ears. And then, of course, history did what the Medici never did. It understood him, completely. His name became immortal, his book one of the most read in the world, his mind studied for 5 centuries. But notice when that understanding finally came. It came after he stopped explaining. After he was gone, and the reaching stopped, and the work was just allowed to sit there and speak for itself, across time, to people who were actually ready to listen. The understanding he chased his whole life arrived the moment he was no longer chasing it. That's almost always how it works. The approval you grasped for flees, and the respect you stop needing quietly arrives. So here's what I want you to take from it. The next time you feel that hot, desperate pull to explain yourself, to justify your choice, to make someone who's already judged you finally understand, stop. Ask yourself one question. Has this person earned my explanation, or are they just holding a gavel I keep handing them? And if it's the gavel, say nothing. Make your choice, let it stand, and walk. Let the people who were meant to understand you find their way to it on their own, the way the world eventually found its way to Machiavelli. And spend your precious words only on the ones who were ever really listening. Tell me the person you most need to stop explaining yourself to. One word, in the comments, and I read them. A parent, an ex, a boss, a whole crowd of people whose approval you've been chasing for years. Mine, for a long time, was a version of everyone, because I thought being understood by everybody was the same as being at peace, and it never was. What's yours? Put it down below, and the next time someone hands you that gavel and demands you plead your case, remember, you can just decline to appear. Silence, aimed at the right person, is the most untouchable thing there is.